just to let you know about me, the instructor in this course, I've been a member of TNL, to Norbu Lane, for several years, and I'm just currently working on an FPMT teacher certification. So I'm not an official teacher. But through that certification process, I've completed courses on minds and mental factors with Venerable George Churanoff. He will actually make a guest appearance toward the end of this class. And on mindfulness with Venerable Sangye Kadro. Other than that, I don't have any special qualifications or realizations to instruct this material. So for that reason, I'm going to reference a lot of quotations from authorities, in this particular lineage. His Holiness the Dalai Lama is another example. And I'll put in explanation where I can, and I'll be happy to answer questions as best I can. And as I said before, TNL has many excellent resources in terms of teachers. Any of the ordained faculty or lay teachers have greater experience and in-depth knowledge, and I encourage you to consult with them. If any questions come up, or you want clarification or explore certain things that I just started down the path with. So we're just going to start with a motivation. And a motivation happens in a class situation, but also in a meditation. And if you've attended a few of our classes and meditations and practices, they always begin with a motivation. So what's happening there is we just generate the positive energy and a specific goal for our session. So we need energy and resolve in a positive tone, either in meditation or in learning. And we also need a specific goal so we don't get sidetracked or just zone out. And how we do that is we just call up an altruistic motivation by imagining how this class tonight or a meditation session might change you positively, making you a better person, better able to help yourself, and also better able to help others, all of those who are around you, close to you, near to you, or maybe not so near. And so if it helps, you can bring to image a mind of the others or your future self who might benefit from your practice. Of course, there's a Buddhist perspective to this as well. The end result, positive or negative, of all of our actions of body, speech, and mind is dependent on our original motivation. So if the motivation is good, focused on a positive benefit for yourself, for you to become a better person, or to help others, it'll eventually result in a positive outcome, although we can't be sure exactly when or what. That's because, at least me, I'm still just an ordinary being. And you can think of that as sort of the functioning of karma. You might have heard that word a couple times in some of your studies. So what's interesting about this whole topic is the greater the intended benefit in the motivation, the greater the potential positive outcome. So we're going to do, this is going to blow your mind, maybe if you haven't heard it before, but we're going to try and set the most positive outcome that we can for our work that we're going to do tonight. The other benefit of a motivation is, even if we lose track or become distracted, which is natural, a positive motivation keeps the tenor of our entire session positive. And so throughout this class tonight, our actions of body, speech, and mind, guided by this positive motivation, will generate virtuous karma, which is the substance that we'll dedicate at the end of the meditation session or teaching. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So let's do this. Let's generate a motivation. And this motivation, it goes by another name. It's called the Four Immeasurables. So we can imagine, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, all of them. That is, all sentient beings, all sufferings, and all causes. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. And may all sentient beings abide together in equanimity, free from attachment to friends and hatred for enemies. So you can think of that as favoritism, but equally beneficial to everyone. So that's our motivation for tonight. Well, I'll begin with some review tonight. And we're discussing the nature of the mind from the Buddhist perspective. And we're really going to talk about it on two levels, just in this quick review. And then we're talking about mental factors. That's like, what is a mental factor? It's just going to be one of the operations or aspects of our mind, kind of isolated so that we can understand it and maybe work with it. So this is just me with my name for it. There's the familiar nature of our mind. And so in Buddhism, the mind is not thought to be just a general reservoir of information, just like Google up here, or just the brain mechanism working. But it's the individual moments of subjective perception, the collection or continuum of which makes up our experience. So it's subjective and experiential. And really, we think of this as, well, isn't that the mind? Isn't that isn't that what the mind is? Just what we're experiencing from moment to moment? Well, not exactly, at least according to the Buddhists. What we're experiencing now, as you're listening to me making sounds with my mouth and trying to explain concepts to you in my limited way, all of those experiences, they are so engaging, but there's other things that are going on kind of simultaneously or in the background or in between even the thoughts and perceptions that we have. And that's what we call the fundamental nature of the mind. The definition in Buddhism sounds pretty simple, but it really unpacks to a lot. So Buddhists say the fundamental nature of the mind is clear and knowing. Well, what does that mean? It's clear, meaning it's non-material. The mind is non-material. So it's not the brain. When you kind of, experience your thoughts, it really is non-material. There's the thinking that's happening, but it isn't related to any kind of atoms or chemicals. Perhaps, maybe a neuroscientist certainly would disagree and say there's chemicals and electrical impulses being manipulated within your brain. But for us, from an experiential, subjective nature, our thoughts are quite different from our brain. We can think about, sensations. And that's part of the mind as well in Buddhism, is that the senses are considered minds as well. So the five senses plus the mental consciousness. So it's non-material and it doesn't obstruct, there's a lot of words are coming, it doesn't obstruct the arising, transformation, and subsiding of thoughts. Really, what that means
Can you say that one more time?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's clear, meaning the mind itself doesn't obstruct the arising, transforming, and subsiding of thoughts. So your thoughts can come up. Let's do an experiment here. Imagine, just like visualize this, a jungle clearing. There's a polar bear in the middle of the jungle clearing. He's got a saddle on. What color is that saddle, Claudia?
Brown.
It's brown. I know, I put you on the spot. But it could be any color, right? You could think of a saddle with any color. And there's a
Mhm.
monkey sitting in that saddle. And the monkey is wearing a little vest and has a fez on and is playing an organ grinder. Okay. And maybe you had kind of just like a little glimpse of that mental image. But I was being silly there, but there you were able to assemble all of that in your mind without any kind of obstruction. I mean, unless you didn't know what a monkey was or a fez. But that's the fundamental nature of the mind, is that whatever thought can come up. And it can be like a good thought, an interesting thought, a virtuous thought, or a non-virtuous thought. And the most non-virtuous thought that could possibly be conceived of can be followed by the most virtuous thought that could possibly be conceived of. So that's what I mean by it's non-obstructive. It doesn't block having thoughts pass through it. And what's interesting here is that as we do our meditations, you may find that between thoughts, the mind is still existing and it has a neutral nature. So it's really the thoughts themselves that we have that are either virtuous, non-virtuous, destructive, or constructive, if you will. And then, so that's the clear part of it, non-material, without obstructing the thoughts. And you can imagine the thoughts as an analogy. You can think of them like clouds appearing in the sky and then continuously changing, and then vanishing again back into the sky. So that's what I mean by arising, transforming, and subsiding of thoughts. It's like those clouds are the thoughts, and the sky is the space in which those thoughts are located. So that's the clear part of the definition, and it's knowing, meaning that, pretty simple, that it just perceives the mere existence of some image, object, perception, like that ridiculous image that I gave you earlier. So the mind just merely perceives it, illuminating it, for example, or in analogy, like a lamp lights up a picture in a dark room. So you can imagine, walking into a dark room with a lamp. Maybe it's a butter lamp, maybe it's like an LED lamp, I don't know. And then, all of a sudden on the wall, you can see the picture. So that's the knowing portion of it. It's also termed luminosity as well. And if we look at our thoughts, the momentary fluctuating nature of our thought, and the endless flow of mental perceptions, emotions, and so on, both constructive and destructive. If we just watch those thoughts a little bit, if we can just get a little bit of space and step back and watch them, not be all consumed by them, we can see that they arise from various causes and conditions. So there's various reasons they come up. We might not be like totally aware of all of them, but they come from, say, past memories, associations, and so on, physical sensations, experiences. So the thoughts themselves aren't in the very nature of the mind. What that means is, well, sure, they appear in your mind, your thoughts, that's where they appear. They appear in your mind, but they arise from causes and conditions. What I mean by that is, suppose I'm an angry person. If that was in the very nature of my mind, wouldn't I be angry all the time? Yeah. I mean, well, yeah, I get angry, but hopefully it's not that often. And there's always a reason. I might not have made it manifest in my mind, but it feels like to me, there's always a reason. So the thoughts come up because of causes and conditions. why this explanation is really important is because it tells us, as Buddhist practitioners or aspiring practitioners or people who are curious, it tells us it's possible to change our thoughts because they come up from causes and conditions, and where they occur is totally neutral and, you could say, permissive or non-obstructive to those thoughts. So we can actually understand now that the fundamental nature of the mind actually lets us sort of control or maybe curate thoughts so that we can, create our own mental experience. And that's really what it's all about, isn't it? What our experience, where our attention goes from moment to moment, is what makes up our collective experience, our memories. All of that is made up by that collection of moments. So if we can curate that, if we can maybe somehow gradually over time reduce the negative, unhelpful, destructive thoughts, and over time increase the positive, constructive, I should have said unhelpful, and then over time increase the constructive, positive, helpful thoughts and emotions, then that's actually going to change our experience and change our mind in a way. So that's an overall view of the mind. And then there are particular components of the mind that have been kind of identified by the great Indian masters. So these are, it's like our weight and our height is a kind of, those are components of our, of our physical body. These are components or aspects of our mind. And so the most important one, the one that we've been talking about for the past few weeks, is called mindfulness. This is different from perhaps the definition of mindfulness you might have encountered before. The more, I like to say colloquial, I don't know if that's the right word, but the more common definition of mindfulness is just kind of a bare awareness. So just kind of, watching your thoughts pass through your mind, and just kind of observing them and not judging them, and just, letting them be. Here, the definition is very different. It's a non-forgetfulness of the mind with regard or with respect to a familiar meditation object. It could be a meditation object, but you don't have to be in meditation to have something in your mind. So it applies to off of the meditation cushion as well. And it has the function of non-distraction. So what we mean here by mindfulness is our ability to keep something we want, a topic, a thought, an idea, something we want in our mind, and keep our mind on that. Sounds pretty easy. No, not so easy, but we've got a lot of techniques to work with that. So that's mindfulness. What goes along with mindfulness, it's like the other side of the coin is introspective awareness. This is maybe more like the common definition of mindfulness, but it's called here in this presentation, introspective awareness. And this is what alerts our mind to being distracted from our object of mindfulness. Often the breath is used. So say we decide that we want to meditate on the breath, but very quickly, after a few seconds, all kinds of distractions happen. So I might be thinking, I used this example last week, I might be meditating on the breath, but then, I'm remembering that beach in Mexico. So what it is introspective awareness says, first of all, you're not meditating on the breath. And second of all, that's the beach in Mexico, and that's not something good to meditate on. So bring your attention back, reassert your mindfulness, and use that to bring your attention back to the breath. So it's a whole process, and this is a natural process, and this is actually the process of what in this particular course is called mindfulness meditation. So I'll let you know right now, if you're meditating on the breath and you get distracted on something else, that doesn't mean you're a bad person. Okay? Well, it comes up, right? So, like, why am I so bad at mindfulness meditation? I'm a bad Buddhist. And, you know, I think that, on some level, that happens a lot. You get frustrated and you start clamping down and everything. But if you look at it as this is an opportunity to exercise your introspective awareness and then bring your attention back, either just simply make the effort to bring your attention back into, and then use mindfulness to keep your attention on the breath, your desired meditation object. If you look at that as a whole process of training, then you can see it's actually good to have distractions, because that's grist for the mill. And so it's a combination in this type of meditation to use both mindfulness when things are going well, and then introspective awareness to catch the situation where the natural situation where you're distracted and bring it back. This isn't just for meditation on the breath. You can imagine if you could do that and practice that and get better and better, if you had thoughts that you preferred not to have in your mind, and other thoughts that you wanted to have in your mind, this is kind of a process in order to kind of train yourself in order to reduce those thoughts that you're done with and wouldn't like to entertain anymore, and then increase kind of the frequency, the duration, the strength of those thoughts that you do want to have by using these two mental factors, mindfulness and introspective awareness. So introspective awareness alerts us to our mind being distracted from our object of mindfulness, or our mind being overwhelmed with dullness. Those are actually the two main problems that we encounter. Distraction, which is sometimes called excitement. That's when, you're kind of split a little bit. Your attention split because there's something else in your mind that maybe is a little bit more attractive to you. I don't know. For me, it's like making lists. Or what am I going to do after the end of this class, after Stephen, stops talking, and I can do what I really want. I'm just joking. But seriously, it's an excitement that carries you away. Or the other one is dullness or drowsiness, which is a sinking or lethargy. So you can see they're sort of related. The mind is excited, maybe too energized, and goes off like a puppy chasing a rabbit, or it gets like overwhelmed with dullness and drowsiness, and you think you're meditating on the breath, but really it's kind of getting close to sleep. You're napping. So introspective awareness catches that. It might even say categorize the thoughts that come up, or kind of analyze the particular situation, whether it's excitement or drowsiness, then apply the appropriate antidotes. So this will enable us to quickly return our attention to the object of mindfulness. And when we do this over and over again, kind of observing and kind of, oh, interesting, almost like a scientist watching this process in our brain, doing it over and over again strengthens our mindfulness, because mindfulness is based on familiarity. And because of the relationship with introspective awareness, it also strengthens that too. You get you gradually over time, you get more and more stronger mindfulness. And then when you go off of the object of mindfulness, your introspective awareness is also like, it's like now it's hair triggered, right? And it can capture it sometimes even before it starts to happen. It can capture that beginning of distraction. And then you can reassert your mindfulness, just bring a bit more energy in your mind onto the meditation object, like the breath. So this means the strength of our introspection increases in step with that of our mindfulness. More mindful, more familiar with whatever we choose to meditate on, the breath, a picture or a statue of the Buddha, a particular, spiritual depiction, like a Tibetan tanka, with pictures of deities, whatever it is. As we get more familiar with it, our mindfulness, our ability to stay with it gets stronger. And when we go off of it, the contrast is greater, and therefore our introspective awareness picks it up more easily. That's two of the 4 mental factors I'm going to talk about. There's actually, in the classical presentations, there's 51. Yeah, there's a lot, but we're just going to stick with these 4 because they're going to be the most useful tools in our toolbox, I guess, when it comes to meditation, but also off the cushion. So imagine mindfulness as stability, right? Stabilizing your mind on an object, just keeping your mind on that object. What follows next, and I think it's kind of natural, but maybe I've just heard this teaching a bunch of times, but what comes next is concentration. If your mind is stable and locked on to your breath, you can concentrate on it. So what they say is concentration dwells single-pointedly on a meditation object in a sustained way. Well, it kind of goes with meditation. And I did say that these particular aspects have kind of been broken out into a framework by the great Indian masters. So we might say in just our everyday language, I'm concentrating on something. Well, yes. And you can break that down into, I'm being mindful of my breath. That means keeping my attention on my breath. And by being mindful of my breath, I'm able to kind of really focus on it and really kind of become in tune and engaged with my breath. So, yeah, I mean, for us Westerners, these distinctions might seem a little bit fine, but they do kind of fit in with like how we say things. And then finally, you have stability, therefore you have focus or concentration. And then that lets you discriminate. And I'm just saying, these are just like generic words when I talk about understanding whatever it is you're looking at, or experiencing whatever you're looking at, the breath in this case. So then we have wisdom, which discriminates, characterizes, and evaluates the features of the meditation object. What's an example? Well, okay, the breath. All right, so I've got the breath in mind. I'm watching the breath. I'm stable on it. I'm concentrating. So I can notice particular characteristics and features of my breath. Am I breathing quickly or slowly? Is the in-breath and out-breath regular or irregular? Is the in-breath and out-breath shorter or longer? Is one shorter than the other? Is one longer than the other? Is there, is there a pause between my in-breath and out-breath? What is that pause like? So that's an example of wisdom. that, and it can be called intelligence, comprehension, experience, understanding, discerning analysis, all of these words. But it's really just like engaging with whatever object and then kind of like realizing things about it. And I think you can see that this is sort of like a very powerful framework for understanding how we kind of observe and learn about things, whether it's on the meditation cushion, whether we're observing how our mind works, what's going through our mind, whether we're thinking about some kind of maybe spiritual reasoning or chain of thought, or maybe something that's going on in our lives that we need to kind of figure out and understand. That's a lot of stuff if you haven't been exposed. So, Claudia or Jade, any questions or comments at this point?
All seems to make sense. Probably won't be as easy to put into motion, to start
Yeah,
practicing. It's
yeah.
feels like it's like you're learning a new skill, like you're training a muscle, but it's up there. Or
That's a
maybe not up
great
there,
way.
but
That's a great way of putting it, Claudia. And that kind of, in a way, that demystifies it a little bit. And it kind of brings in some good, associations. Like if you're training, I don't know, if you're like, maybe, okay, I'm going to jog every day, or I'm going to lift weights, or I'm going to do yoga. Yeah, I mean, you have good days and bad days, and sometimes it seems like you never make progress, and then all of a sudden you make huge progress. I think this is very similar to that. We divided, and so let's talk a little bit about meditation. And so in this lineage, you're going to find meditation is really important, actually. They say the mind is the workshop. That's where we do all of our work. And so these four mental factors are like, they're like the table saw, the bandsaw, the drill press, and I don't know. I'm not really a woodworker, so something really important in a workshop. So, but when we're meditating, we can divide meditations into two major classes: stabilizing and analytical. And again, it sounds complicated, but stabilizing, okay, in this lineage, two main types: stabilizing, analytical. Sometimes stabilizing is called serenity, and sometimes analytical is called insight meditation. And both actually are necessary for our complete development of the mind. So stabilizing is just resting on the object through the power of mindfulness, like the breath. And that's basically what we were just talking about. It's just staying on the breath when you get distracted, recognizing that you're distracted, making an effort to bring the mind back, and then reestablishing mindfulness. Or if there's more, advanced things you need to do, like you're sinking and, getting lax and so on. Or if you're like really excited, there's different things you can do to deal with that, but you catch it with introspective awareness. So that's stabilizing meditation. Focusing the mind on a single object is what we normally, us Westerners, think about as a meditation. Maybe analytical meditation is less well known, but it covers like a whole bunch of different things: various degrees of analysis, at the minimum, following a specific line of thought or recipe without any obvious formal reasoning. So these might be some of the Buddhist type meditations. An example is, say, just meditating on the three principal aspects of the path, which are renunciation, bodhicitta, and wisdom. Or maybe the 7-point cause and effect meditation in order to generate compassion. Or even just thinking about, like, if you went away and you thought what I said to you tonight was interesting, just thinking about what I said, maybe looking at some other texts. That's also analytical meditation. One amazing thing about our mind is is that we can actually cultivate what we want to cultivate, the positive qualities. We can cultivate those limitlessly. So I'll read just a couple three paragraphs from His Holiness. He explains why. So in his excuse me, in his commentary on reliable cognition, Dharmakirti, who was a great Indian master, a logician, he explained why it's possible to cultivate the mind's excellent qualities limitlessly and to transform our ordinary mind into a Buddha's fully awakened mind. That's kind of what this lineage says, is that it's possible to do this. But of course, we need reasons to say why it's possible. So the clear and knowing nature of the mind that we just talked about is a stable basis for excellent qualities. Why? Because it is firm and continual. There's nothing that can cease it. From the Buddhist perspective, the mind keeps going. And we know from our own experience, our thoughts keep going, right? Our thoughts that appear in this sky of the mind just keep coming. They keep coming. Sometimes you get like really weary about a thought that keeps coming up and thinking about it again and again and again, but it just keeps coming and other thoughts come as well. So it's kind of like the mind doesn't wear out. That's what we're saying here. And the counterexample is if we continuously boil water, it'll dry up and nothing will remain. So there's no basis for limitlessly boiling water. And then what Dharmakirti says is excellent qualities can't be cultivated limitlessly on an unstable basis, such as the physical body, because it falls ill, ages, and eventually dies. Yeah. However, the clear light mind, that's the fundamental nature of the mind that I was talking about, is stable and continuous. And I'll give you a few reasons why, but it's stable and continuous. So the Buddhist view is that the mind, while it exists, along with our brain, this fundamental nature that I just described to you continues. So they posit that the mind has always existed at this very fundamental level. Then eventually we end up with the mind and our brain together. And then we have our kind of human experiences and human thoughts in that fundamental nature of the mind. And then we pass away. Our characteristically human thoughts and experiences and sensations, they pass away as well. But that clear nature of the mind continues. So this gives us the opportunity to keep training. It's not just one lifetime in order to do the work that we want to do in order to improve our qualities. So that's the Buddhist perspective about that fundamental nature of the mind. So we can also build up, and this is also something that we can observe ourselves as we look at our mind. The mind can become habituated to excellent qualities that can be built up cumulatively. So we can gradually build up those qualities without having to begin anew each time we focus on developing them. A counterexample is a high jumper. I think the human record for high jumping is around 8 feet. So a high jumper, though, no matter how great they are, they can't develop their ability limitlessly. So each time the bar is raised, they have to cover the same distance they jumped before plus a little bit more in order to clear the bar. However, the mind's nature is different. The energy from cultivating a quality one day remains, so that if that same quality is cultivated the next day, It builds on what was previously accomplished without having to reestablish it. Like if we learned, I don't know, any skill really, if you learn that skill, the next day you go to apply that skill, you're starting basically from that level. There might be a little bit of fluctuation. And so if you continue to apply yourself, you can increase that skill. That's what they're saying in terms of qualities. So we don't need to exert the same degree of energy to get to the same level on the next day. And of course, this requires consistent training and practice. It just, to me anyways, it kind of, this part of it makes sense. Of course, we need consistent training, and otherwise our spiritual muscles will atrophy. But if we practice regularly, our energy can be directed to enhancing the excellent qualities continuously until the point where they become so familiar that they're natural and spontaneous. It makes me think of like a great musician or something, because they're practicing every day and they just keep getting better and better until they can just riff something just almost automatically. And then here's another interesting kind of Buddhist perspective. It says excellent qualities can be enhanced but never diminished by reasoning and by wisdom. So what they're asserting here is that constructive attitudes and emotions have a valid support in reasoning and wisdom. And so things like compassion, faith, integrity, generosity, concentration, and all the other excellent qualities, we can come up with reasons for them. Why they help us and why they help all of those around us, for example. So they have kind of a logic, a rationality to them. And I don't know if you've been exposed to any teachings on emptiness. There's kind of a deeper level of logic to these positive qualities. And that when we look at them and the basis that they have, we can see the basis is something that is supported by what is called ultimate analysis. I'm not going to get into that. I'll just leave that for your own explorations. But what it means is as a counterexample, sort of negative or destructive attitudes, we can look at them and reason about them, like selfishness. Oh yeah, I'm going to be selfish and I'm just going to get everything for me. And I'm just going to keep it all for myself. We can see that, well, that's a pretty like short-term kind of sort of very myopic kind of approach to things, since basically that you're not really able to kind of just like be totally independent and stand alone and just kind of take care of yourself and never need anyone else to help you. So that's kind of the logical or rational reason why you can sort of tear down some of these negative, destructive attitudes, emotions, whatever. Just to give you like a little taste from an ultimate analysis, from a kind of the perspective of emptiness, the idea that selfishness is good for me kind of depends on the fact that it's all about me. And that me is something special in the world. But when we analyze it through ultimate analysis, we think that we can see that, well, there's nothing special about me. This is from the Buddhist perspective. I mean, I don't want to suffer and I want to have happiness. And I presume that Claudia and Jay want to have no suffering and happiness. And so in that regard, we're equal. We also, maybe, through 6 degrees of separation or something, we also rely on each other. So I could do something selfish that I think is helping me will end up coming around and harming me. And that the person that I think is really so important and so special isn't really there. I'm not exactly the center of the universe. That was kind of my lame way of sort of giving a sort of a summary of what ultimate analysis it is. And it really is incredibly deep and interesting. And I'm not going to be able to, maybe I'll never be able to go into it, but I won't be able to go into it tonight. But it's a really interesting topic. I said something here, and I think I'm gonna discuss this. One thing that we have to, come to grips with if we're, analyzing, Buddhist teachings is what I mentioned, the mind is without a beginning or end. So the mind is actually different. It's not something that just emerges from the brain, and when the brain is gone, there is no mind. That's definitely, kind of our materialistic scientific view, I guess. But that's not the Buddhist view. And so there's different reasonings they have and different evidence that they give for you to consider. And we'll talk about how to analyze and how to engage with Buddhist teachings. But if you accept the premise that the fundamental nature of the mind, what we were just talking about, that the mind is immaterial, then it doesn't depend on necessarily, at least the fundamental nature of the mind doesn't depend on the brain. So there's some energy or some kind of phenomenon that continues. So it's not totally linked to the brain. If you accept that premise, and then if you say, well, okay, I'll buy that. And then if you say that, well, what causes a moment of thought? Well, this is the second premise, the prior moment of thought, because I have chains of thought. So as long as I have a moment of thought, I know I'm going to have a next moment of thought, and a next moment of thought, and then a next moment of thought, and then a next moment of thought, and so on. This is the logical argument. But what about, like, at my birth or at my conception? Does thought really begin if you accept these two premises? Well, if you say, well, the first thought at conception or development or birth or whatever, there must have been a prior moment of thought, and so on. And so their logic, the logic of that argument says that there really can be no beginning and no end. I don't know if even that argument made sense to you, whether you accept it or not, but so that's kind of the logical approach that they take. But there's other things that we can look at. So, for example, there's, cases of young children who demonstrate knowledge, experiences, and memories from before their birth. And this is quite common in, like in the Tibetan society, where they would have certain kind of affinities or knowledge that, how did they know that? Knowledge from some, that would have gone together with someone from another lifetime. And then there's near-death experiences where vital signs have stopped. So there's nothing going on. Maybe they're revived, through, extreme medical intervention. The person comes back alive and they say, oh yeah, I was there in the operating room and I saw what you were doing. I was up there, like up in the corner watching, and I could see my body down there. So there's that evidence to consider as well. And then there's something, a Tibetan phenomenon called tukdam, where a highly realized meditator enters a state like suspended animation. This is after their death. So they pass away, and their body enters a state of what looks like suspended animation. So all of the processes of decay are arrested for a period of several days or weeks, and there's documentation of that. So that's more evidence to consider that there's something going on, after the brain is apparently dead. And then finally, when we talk about Buddhist teachings, we talk about reliable authorities. And, really we're talking about the scriptures and the teachings of the Buddha. And so we go in and we look at everything that the Buddha taught, all of the stuff that we can observe ourselves, things we can reason about that he taught. We look at all of that and we say, like, is it consistent? Does it make sense? Does it all hang together? Is it coherent? So we have that, what we can observe and what we can infer or deduce about. And then there are topics that we can't observe or deduce about. And one of those is kind of the continuity of the mind before and after death. But if we trust everything that Buddha said and can verify it in the first two categories, and if we have faith in the Buddha, then, well, what should we think about that third category where we can either, we can't disprove it, we can't prove it. What should we think? So that's kind of the fifth reason there, is to just at least entertain this and explore it yourself. And the Buddha himself said this: just as a goldsmith would test his gold by burning, cutting, and rubbing it, so must you examine my words and accept them, not merely out of reverence for me. So the Buddha is saying, okay, well, look at the evidence, look at what I said, and test it yourself. So that's where I'll leave that. And again, it's interesting. I took a course in mineralogy a long time ago, and that's actually how you test gold. You burn it to see if, there's any impurities, any amalgams in it. You cut it to see if it's soft. If it's brittle, well, it's probably iron pyrite or chalcopyrite or something like that, because it'll break instead of being soft and ductile. And you rub it. Again, this is an actual test that geologists use in the field. They rub gold on what's called a streak plate, a ceramic plate. And if it stays gold, then it's probably gold. And if it turns green, it's probably some kind of iron sulfide mineral. So there's kind of a scientific approach here. And again, I mentioned like the three different categories. Whenever we're looking at a quotation or a Buddhist teaching, even the watered down amateurish ones that I'm giving tonight, you use a threefold analysis to determine the validity for you of the quotation or teaching. And you only need to meet one of these criteria, but something obvious, not contradicted by like a valid perception. What you see in your brain, that could be your ultimate test. Is you look at my words, as clumsy as they are, and say, well, is that kind of what I think is happening up there in my own experience? You can also go to the next category, slightly obscure phenomena. For example, are things permanent? Is there anything permanent? Or is everything impermanent? That's an example. And you can use just valid inferential reasoning and evidence to determine those slightly obscure phenomena. And then there's the extremely obscure phenomena that we can't say one way or another. For example, karma. For example, past lives, future lives, and so on. But those, we say, those are ones that are not contradicted by our inferences and are based on scriptural authority, basically the Buddha. So you have like these three tools to look at what I'm saying tonight and any other course that you take at Thubten Norbu Leing or anywhere else, any books you read. I think what we'll do is we'll do a quick Yeah. We'll do a quick meditation here, if that's all right. Let me read just a little bit here to get you prepared. But as you're getting prepared, just kind of sit straight up in a comfortable position. Try and sit straight up without leaning back. This just gives your mind more energy. Um, and then just kind of relax your body, just settle any kind of fidgeting, and then physically increase the vigilance. So there's like a physical cue to increase vigilance or attention by just raising your sternum a little bit. So shoulders down and back, sternum up, and then chin tucked in a little bit. So I'll say a few words and then we'll do that meditation. When we pay mindful attention to an object of interest, our choice, mindful meaning that we keep it in our mind, we can then examine and evaluate it either in general or in detail, so general characteristics or specific details through concentration. Such examination and evaluation could involve thinking, that is, applying concepts and reasoning to gain a better understanding of the object. And this meditation, thinking, is called analytical meditation, analyzing the object. We could also do stabilizing meditation, where we just stay on the breath and experience it, engage with it, and just become more familiar with it without trying to take it apart or anything. And now let's take, for example, the practice of loving kindness. When we bring to mind a loved one by allowing a visual image of a person to appear to us, we are attending to this person with mindfulness. We can further reflect and examine what we know about this person held in mind by our mindfulness, especially in terms of her good qualities and her many loving, kind actions towards us. So we can see, like, the basis of loving kindness is a certain appreciation and gratitude, recognition of what they have done for us, recognition of their selflessness, which has benefited us. And then we may respond in turn with heartfelt feelings of loving kindness. In this way, mindfulness, concentration, and discerning wisdom have contributed to enhance the wonderful quality of loving kindness. So we've used those like really abstract sounding mental factors in order to actually make ourselves more loving and kind. We can also apply the same process to ourselves, making ourselves the focal object of our own reflection and practice of loving kindness. So just relax, let your eyes, depending on how you like to do this, your eyes can close gently, or you can keep them slightly open or hooded. In general, if you're beginning, keeping them closed is probably better because you tend to be more distracted and excited when you're beginning, or you can just keep them slightly open, but that takes a little bit of practice. So in our pursuit of happiness, it's vital to recognize how few things in the world are subject to our personal control. Other people, family, friends, busy colleagues, and strangers. They behave as they wish, in accordance with their own ideas and aims. Likewise, there is little we can do to control the economy, international relations, or even our environment. So if we base our pursuit of happiness on our ability to influence other people and the world at large, we're almost certainly doomed to failure. What can we control? What freedom do we really have here and now? Our first act of freedom should be to choose our priorities wisely. One major impediment to training mindfulness is not finding the time to do it, not giving it a priority in our lives. And the reason we don't find time to meditate is because we're devoting so much time to other priorities. Of course, some of these priorities center on our basic needs, but many are wrapped up in craving, desiring the symbols of the good life, wealth, transient pleasures, praise, and reputation. We may deprive ourselves of the reality of living well. The reason we don't devote more time to balancing our minds is that we are betting our lives that we can find the happiness we seek by chasing fleeting pleasures. Psychologists have called this the hedonic treadmill. And the first step to escaping from this exhausting grind is to seek a vision of genuine happiness that draws on our own largely untapped inner resources. This is how we begin to cultivate loving kindness, first for ourselves, and then for all those around us. So we'll just revisit our meditation posture. So bring your awareness to the physical sensations throughout your body, breathing into any areas that feel tense or constricted. Be still and adopt a posture of vigilance. Again, physically, what that is just to raise your sternum, relax your shoulders down and back, energize your spine, but do that naturally. Then take 3 slow, deep breaths, breathing through your nostrils, down into your belly, expanding the diaphragm, and finally the chest. As you exhale, exhale effortlessly, settling your body in its resting state. Naturally, you'll have distractions. Just notice them and bring the attention back to the breath. Do that gently but firmly. It's like taking the hand of a loved child when you're crossing a busy intersection. So settle your awareness in a space of relaxation, stillness, and clarity. Now, from within this serenity, Arouse your imagination with 3 questions. The first one is, what would I love to receive from the world in order to have a happy, meaningful, and fulfilling life? Some of these things may be tangible goods, such as food, lodging, clothing, and medical care to take care of ourselves. But other things for your well-being may be intangible, such as harmony in your environment, the warm companionship of others, and wise counsel to guide you on your spiritual journey. Bring clearly to the mind the things you desire to meet your basic needs. Then allow the yearning to arise. May these authentic desires be fulfilled. Each of us is constantly changing from moment to moment, day to day, as our bodies and minds are continually in a state of flux. The next question is, what kind of person do I want to become? What personal qualities do I want to possess? You are changing all the time, whether you choose to or not. So envision the changes you would love to experience in your evolution as a human being. Imagine both short-term and long-term changes. And as you envision the person you would love to evolve into, imagine that this transformation is actually taking place here and now. None of us lives in absolute isolation from the others, no matter where or how we live. We can't help but influence those around us through both our action and our inaction. We are making an impact on the world, whether we want to or not. The last question you may ask yourself is, what would I love to offer the world and to those around me and to the environment at large? What kind of a mark would I love to make on the world? Invite this vision into your field of consciousness, embellishing it with as many details as you can think of, and then imagine that this dream is being realized here and now. Just as you seek happiness for yourself, so do all the people in your neighborhood yearn for their own fulfillment. Expand the field of your loving awareness to embrace each sentient being, human and non-human, in your neighborhood, wishing, may each of you, like myself, find the happiness you seek, and may you cultivate its true causes. Continue to extend your loving kindness to everyone around you, gradually expanding your circle until it includes all beings throughout the world, each one seeking happiness, just like you. That was the meditation on loving kindness. Any observations, any questions, anything that came up for you that you might like to share? Please go ahead, Jay.
Okay. Look, for many, many years, I fought for social justice. I was a social worker, and whatever environment I was in, that was the motivating factor. I'm retired now, so I'm no longer in the direct fray. Yeah. And one of the things that comes up as I look at the world and feel quite overwhelmed with what's going on, I it's a small consolation, but I hope, and I don't know, but oh, I hope it's true. It's like I do a kind of Tonlin, and I send out, love, compassion into the universe, right? I sound a little hippie-ish here, but you know where I'm going. But it's like, I'm hoping that does some good, but I'm not convinced. It's like, am I simply deluding myself so that I feel better? I don't know. I don't really have any other choice, but yeah. So that's one of the things that comes up for me right now in doing this type of meditation, which I do a fair amount of. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So just for
Oh,
a
so Stephen, am I
yeah.
doing any good?
Well, yeah, because you're going to become a Buddha if you are a Mahayana Buddhist. And so this is part of the progress for you. That's one way of putting it. I think, but really kind of like on a very basic level, you said you feel better. Does that mean that when you're with other people after having done that type of practice, you're a better person?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What happens with me that I can tell, okay, I'm not liking this as being recorded, but I was surprised to sort of find that there are people who, when they're angry with someone, don't have the desire to murder them. Okay. I do. When I die, I'm going to say, if there was St. Peter, I'd tell him, look, mate, I haven't killed anybody. This was my biggest accomplishment. I restrained myself. Right? And I am losing that desire.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still find myself angry and frustrated, but the desire to actually murder the whoever has dampened down considerably. So that's my cue of progress.
Yeah. Yeah. And, these are difficult. Well, okay. So, when you read the ancient texts, you know what they say? These are very degenerate times. The ancient days used to be much better.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And then
I'm
you
just trying to
then
put
you
that
read
into
history.
perspective,
You
not
read history.
minimizing. But also remember, just like, okay, so a mindfulness, but there's distraction and sinking. You catch that, you bring it back, you catch it with introspective awareness, you bring it back. It's kind of that, falling off, I don't know, falling off the horse or whatever. and then getting back on again. That's kind of how you do meditation. But it's similar, I think, with morality. What morality is restraining yourself from doing negative actions. That's the Buddhist perspective. That's one of the moralities. And the very fact that you restrained yourself generates positive karma. So if you accept karma, then what you're doing is you're preparing the ground for yourself to come back. And then maybe that particular affliction will be less strong in your next lifetime. Again, if you accept for those reasons that I gave, that there could be lifetimes after this one. And so you're actually doing good work. You shouldn't say, I haven't killed anyone yet. You should say, I haven't killed anyone yet because I've been restraining myself and generating positive karma for your
Okay,
next rebirth.
I'll focus on this.
So focus on that. Okay. Did you want to say anything? I'm sorry, Jay, are you done? Or,
Yeah, thank
yeah,
you very
okay.
much.
A few things to think about. Claudia, anything?
Yeah, I found it interesting that I got a little stuck on the third question of like, what do you want to give, I don't know, the world or your gift? I can't remember how you phrased it. And on the other two, I was fine. Um, and similar to Jay, I'm a licensed mental health counselor, although now I'm working more in the realm of I'm in the nonprofit world doing like
Mhm.
financial coaching. And it's a very intentional choice I've made to be there, to be in that type of position. But when that question came up, I'm like, I'm teaching people to participate in the very capitalistic system and get very hopefully stable with their finances, also knowing that that by itself doesn't lead to fulfillment. Like it's nice to have a home and shelter and emergency savings. And I think we can take it too far and still be unhappy. So I'm having to figure out like what my role is in my day job and like what am I really contributing to, because I think it's really
Yeah.
noble and it's good. And I'm also familiar with, you know, starting out in very humble beginnings, and sometimes when you start with nothing and you see what other people have, you want those things, but then you get those things and you realize they don't make you happy. So I'm like, am I helping these people, you know, along this path that like, where's it leading? Where am I leading
Yeah.
them? And, you know, so that's kind of what came up.
Yeah, those are really interesting thoughts. And, I can't really, I'm certainly not at your level in terms of being a professional and an expert and so on. But yeah, I mean, it just from your description, what it sounds like to me is you're kind of, giving people the basis, the foundation. You don't want to kind of oversell the benefits of, material goods and a lifestyle of luxury. But what you said was interesting, Claudia, is you said that you kind of came from like limited means yourself.
Mhm.
And in a way, you kind of have to experience that getting these, I thought that big screen TV, if I got it, I would be really happy, but oh, it's a year later and there's a bigger screen TV that has more colors. And so now I want that one. But I think we all have to go through that. I'm not like especially realized or, virtuous or anything. And you just kind of have to do that work. I feel like what you're doing though is you're just helping people get to that stage. You could also, I mean, I don't want to tell you this is just something like this is occurring to me is that you could also say, yeah, but with that, you're saving, you're reducing your credit card debt, you're paying less interest. What are you going to do with that money, do you think, that's really going to make you happy? Is it just going to be, will some material item make you happier? Maybe, maybe it'll make your life easier. Um, you could just maybe plant that seed. I don't know. But I'm very grateful that you shared that with me. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for your feedback. And I do think it's interesting just having like a dialogue about it. because I think it's also easy to judge things like the material stuff, right? You go buy material things and oh, look, you're unsatisfied. The second time I was exploring Buddhism, I was like, I'll be back. I got to go get a master's degree in counseling. I've got to, and I think there is something developmental. Like you have to experience that to then be like, there's something else. This wasn't it. That wasn't it.
Yeah, I
The
think
material thing wasn't it.
what I find, is, I mean, there's so many teachings in Buddhism, and some of them are extremely basic, but they're also incredibly valuable. There's one teaching on generosity where, really, I can't, sorry, it's not really showing. I've got a pencil in my hand, and I can't share this with this is my pencil. I can't give this up. And so you start by giving it to the other hand. No, seriously. So, yeah, I mean, we're on. The other thing is that this is it's like a steps on the path. It's a graded path. And we just find through teachings, where in this aspect, here's where I'm on the path. On this aspect, here, I'm way down here on this path. And you just have all of the teachings that you can put together and then work in a graded way. But that's accepted. And it's built into the Buddhist teachings. If you continue on with this particular lineage, there's all sorts of different scopes that they talk about and different levels of attainment and so on, different steps you can take. And that, I think, fundamentally is kind of a recognition of the fact that we're all in different places and we all got to, start where we are, begin working from there, building up a little bit by little bit. I think what I'll do is, if it's all right with you, I've got kind of a guest meditation. It's virtual. Venerable George isn't going to appear, but this is one of the great teachers in this lineage, Venerable George Churinov. And he did, he's doing a course, actually. I would call it maybe an advanced course, but he gives a really good meditation at the beginning. I kind of got an explanation of what he's talking about, but I don't want to go too long. I know that it's in the morning for Jay, and I don't want to go too long. It's less than 15 minutes. So I thought I would just play this meditation from Venerable George for you. You could just let your mind listen to it and run free and just get this sense of what kind of a highly expert and highly realized teacher, how they go about this whole meditation practice to kind of build these qualities of loving kindness and compassion. So if it's all right with you guys, Venerable George, take it away. Oh.
Okay, thank you. So good to see you. We're going to begin with a little meditation, as we do. So sit yourself comfortably. Leg in the Vajra position. Relax your body. Relax your mind. Identify your respiration without controlling it, just like, say, watching your heartbeat, trying to sense your heartbeat. Just sense your breathing. Once you've identified it, place it in your mindfulness to the exclusion of all other thoughts. Watching, being aware with your wisdom consciousness when you're breathing out, when you're breathing in, especially the endpoints. At the beginning, you'll notice quite definitely if there are other thoughts in your mind. Your mindfulness will be disturbed a little bit by other thoughts creeping in, rather than thinking of only the breathing, only watching the breathing. So you just squeeze your mindfulness a little, tighten your mindfulness to keep in mind the breathing. Let the other thoughts go unattended. And they'll disappear. If you had a little success in calming your mind, then move. You can imagine following your breath up your nostrils to the top of your head, down to your throat, to your heart chakra. Leave your attention around there. And just focus on your mental consciousness, the thoughts that are in your mind, not your eyes, not your ears. Their thoughts, their emotions, if you are feeling anxious or afraid, if you're angry or attached, proud, some thoughts might be future-oriented, plans about later. Some might be memories of the past. Some are observations of the present, or maybe judgments upon observations of the present. And then whatever you happen to think about instigates other thoughts, sort of stream of thought, rambling mind, monkey-like mind. See beyond them. Try to recognize that the substratum of the mind has a conventional nature of clear light, which means it doesn't obstruct the entry of thoughts into your mind, nor hold them back from leaving, absorbing back into the mind. And with your mental consciousness, try to focus on that understanding of the clear light nature. Just as focusing on the breathing helped you prevent other thoughts from arising, here being mindful of the clear light nature of the mind, the conventional clear light nature, you can even more easily notice the arisal of other thoughts, because the clear light nature is one that has this empty aspect. Whenever you get in a blue funk and feel all is, dark and bad, go back to this resource in your mind, the clear light nature. Remind yourself, all of these bad thoughts, or some, even if you don't recognize them as thoughts, maybe depression, just the unhappiness of the mind that you don't necessarily see an immediate cause for, all of this can be eliminated from the mind. It's not, my mind is not this nature. These are just transient, adventitious events. Instead, I can reformat my hard drive of a mind, so to speak. I can introduce within this clear light nature all of the positive thoughts, processes, wisdom, compassion, renunciation. Within this clear light nature of my mind, I can purify negative karmic instincts that are not arisen at the moment, but still have the potential to arise. I'm okay. I can become a more complete person. I can get rid of my faults. I can become less of a burden to others. Not only that, I can begin to not harm others and actually benefit them. This is my conventional Buddha nature, my developmental Buddha nature. The fact that I can recognize it now is due to this auspicious moment, the Buddha called it. This moment when karmic causes I created in previous lives have come together this life in the human realm. When the Buddha's teachings are still existing, when the Buddha taught, there's a community of like aspirants, benefactors. I'm of sound mind and body. I haven't created any of the most heavy actions that would preclude my taking a human rebirth in the next lifetime. I haven't created any of the 5 actions of immediate retribution, or 5 heinous actions, sometimes translated. I could, if I wanted to, become ordained. I haven't any of the faults. I can practice the Dharma rather than spending my time accumulating friends and possessions, trying to get power, notoriety, having the most, I can't remember what they're called, the most posts on Facebook or something like that, or most likes or followers. I can, in this life, in theory, I could achieve liberation this lifetime, or even enlightenment if I had the right karmic seeds already. In order to become a better person, overcome my faults, and help others, I have to take into consideration the entirety of sentient beings, from the hell realms, hungry ghost realm, the animal realm, including insects and worms and animals we can see and cannot see, the human realm, the God realm, all the living beings migrating from one existence to another have all been my mother numberless times, are in dire straits right now, caught in the ocean of cyclic existence, like the scene in the Titanic, not even having a portion of the hull of the ship to hold on to. Left to their own devices, all these sentient beings who've been my mother numberless times and are exactly equal with me in wanting to be happy, wanting to be free of suffering. Using this auspicious moment of a human rebirth, perfect human rebirth, to contemplate them for a change from the side of empathy and compassion, thinking that the best use of this auspicious moment would be to create the causes to be able to help them repay their kindness, to achieve my own and their ultimate welfare, my achievement of the state of Buddhahood. In order to do that, I need an accumulation of merit, an accumulation of wisdom. In order to accumulate wisdom and merit, I need to know the methods, the meditations, the logic. So today, I'm going to listen, participate in this class. Lama Tsongkhapa's great exposition, illumination of the intent, in order to accumulate the methods to create the collections of wisdom and merit. In order to become a Buddha, for the welfare of sentient beings. I'm going to participate with a strong motivation in order to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Beyond my trivial, personal, egocentric motivations, wanting to be well-liked, wanting to be learned, wanting to be respected, my deep down ultimate purpose is to achieve enlightenment to benefit all sentient beings. And then bring your attention back, present.
Well, thank you, Venerable George, and thank you, Shanti Deva Center, New York City. Any questions?
I just wanted to say thank you. This was great. You're so welcoming. And thank you, Jay. I'm just so happy to be here. So thank you both.
That's great. Just keep that feeling in your mind, Claudia, and we'll do a dedication. We talked about motivation at the beginning because we had a good motivation and we just kind of, we got together and we thought about these things. We exchanged our ideas and our experiences and so on. And so we generated some pretty powerful virtuous karma just by doing those actions. Now we want that karma, that potential for something good, to ripen in a particular way. And that is so that we may become enlightened, become Buddhas. This is the Buddhist perspective. So we may become Buddhas in order that we would be in the optimal state to help all other beings. Because as we know, we're all very limited right now. I know certainly for me, sometimes it's just even restraining some of those negative thoughts is difficult. So what we do is we take that substance, the virtuous karma, and we dedicate it so that it will hopefully bring the causes and conditions for us to reach that wonderful goal. So we say it this way: due to the merits of these virtuous actions that we've accomplished in this class tonight, thanks to you guys. And we can also, take any virtuous actions we did today or yesterday or last week, or ones that maybe we'll do in the future. And then use those as the cause to support, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that same enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta, that wish in the verse I just read, that's what bodhicitta is, may that supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow. So we gradually cultivate it. And may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. And then finally, a short verse from the 10th chapter of Shantideva's Way of the Bodhisattva. The motto of His Holiness the Dalai Lama: for as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain, until then may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.